Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving headfirst into a pretty unsettling thought experiment. A researcher posed a question to an advanced AI that most people consider, unthinkable. What would actually happen if the world just suddenly stopped lending the US money? And the AI's answer? Well, to put it mildly, it was catastrophic. You see, for decades, the entire global financial system has been built on something called dollar privilege. It's this idea that because the US dollar is the world's go-to currency, America can borrow just massive sums of money and at really low interest rates. It's a huge, huge economic advantage. But what if that privilege just vanished?
Now, let's be super clear here. This is not a prediction. Think of it more like a stress test, a thought experiment that's really designed to show us the hidden architecture of our global economy and all the fragile spots we don't normally get to see. So let's dive into the first part of this experiment together. Okay, so the first thing that happens is this immediate fiscal shock. And it really just comes down to some simple and frankly brutal arithmetic. The US government spends way more money than it brings in through taxes. And if you suddenly can't borrow anymore, that massive gap has to be closed instantly. And that gap, it's a staggering $1.8 trillion. To try and wrap your head around that number, it is larger than the entire economy of countries like Australia or Spain. But the real challenge here isn't just the size of the hole, it's the speed. This isn't something you fixed over a decade. It has to be filled overnight. So how in the world do you even do that? Well, the choices are basically impossible. On one hand, you could try to slash 25 to 30% of all federal spending. And we're talking about everything. Deep cuts to Social Security, the military, Medicare, you name it. Or, on the other hand, you could try to impose these economy-crushing tax hikes of a similar size. The reality is, it would probably be some devastating mix of both. But here's where the AI's analysis gets really interesting. It suggests that these direct cuts in taxes, they're just the beginning. The real devastation comes from the ripple effects, the economic aftershocks. And those could trigger something that looks an awful lot like a Great Depression 2.0. Let's see how that would unfold. This all comes down to something in economics called the multiplier effect. Just think of it like this. When the government stops spending a dollar, it's not just $1 that disappears from the economy. The business that was supposed to get that dollar can't pay its employee, and that employee, in turn, can't go buy groceries. So that single dollar ends up creating a much, much larger negative ripple. So here is the crucial point, and this is where it gets really, really frightening. That initial $1.8 trillion cut doesn't just subtract $1.8 trillion from the economy. As you can see here, that shock gets multiplied. Millions and millions of people lose their jobs. Consumer spending just grinds to a halt, and the AI projects this could trigger a mind-boggling $3.6 trillion contraction in the total economy. Now, to put that in perspective for you, that shock is about half the total damage of the Great Depression. But here is the truly terrifying difference that this chart shows us. The Great Depression unfolded over 4 long years. This would happen all at once, like a sudden, violent economic heart attack. And as if that weren't bad enough, the AI's analysis points to a second, simultaneous crisis that could be even deadlier: a total collapse of our supply chains. It's a scenario it calls the offshoring trap. So what exactly is the offshoring trap? Well, for decades, the global economy has been all about one thing: efficiency, making stuff cheaper by moving manufacturing to other countries. The trap springs when your currency suddenly becomes worthless. All of those critical things you need to import become completely unaffordable, and you no longer have the factories at home to make them for yourself. Let's make this real for a second. Take pharmaceuticals. The US imports somewhere between 80 and 90% of the active ingredients needed for its drugs. In this scenario, pharmacies would just run out. No more affordable insulin, no more blood pressure medication, no more life-saving antibiotics. And this vulnerability, it isn't just in medicine. It's in the technology that powers our entire world. As you can see, about 90% of advanced semiconductors, the brains in all our electronics, come from overseas, along with most of our solar panels and wind turbines. I mean, think about that. Our hospitals, our defense systems, our energy grid, they all rely on critical parts that we just don't make at home anymore. So, what happens when you combine a massive economic depression with a catastrophic supply shock?
The model suggests the result is a rapid, terrifying breakdown of social order, what the researcher called the Hobbesian scenario.
The model then maps out this grim but logical timeline. Within just 6 months, you'd see widespread shortages of medicine and food, which would quickly lead to civil unrest. Within a few years, excess mortality, that's deaths from a simple lack of medical care and drugs, reaches into the millions. And this is followed by a long, painful decade of forced reindustrialization, with a standard of living that's been thrown back in time.
So, okay, after walking through this truly terrifying scenario, what's the ultimate point of all this? It's not to predict the future, it's to reveal a fundamental danger that's basically hidden in plain sight. A danger the analysis calls the invisible crisis. The core insight from this whole experiment is this: the biggest risk isn't just the mountain of government debt we always hear about. It's the invisible, brittle supply chains that our modern lives are built on. Just like the quote says, the fragility itself is the crisis. We just can't see it until everything starts to break. Ultimately, this whole thought experiment forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question about the modern world. For the last 40 years or so, we've relentlessly chased efficiency, cheaper products, faster delivery, leaner systems. But in trading our resilience for all that efficiency, have we maybe forgotten how to survive a crisis?